Give me 1 second. Brian, would you mind getting the door? Thank you. All right.
But people can still get in, right?
Oh, yeah. We're not
We're
not locking them out.
I have a lot of, because I'm always late myself, so I'm like not, you know.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the launch of Love the World or Get Killed Trying with Alvina Chamberland and Penny Arcade. Happy to welcome Alvina and Penny back. The last time we had you both together was when we were on the Lower East Side back in 2014. And somehow we're all still kicking. So my name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, along with my partner, Donnie Jokum. Tonight, we're being helped out by our volunteer, Ryan Warden, and the Bureau is an all-volunteer queer bookstore that has been in existence since 2012, and we've been here at the center since 2014. So the Bureau relies on donations and sales to keep this boat afloat. We have a suggested donation of $10, but we always say give what you can, if you can. And if you'd prefer to support us by buying books, that is a wonderful thing to do and makes perfect sense because we're a bookstore.
And because it's a book.
And it's a book launch.
You can't hear for the book.
So I'm going to pass this around. You can also give on Venmo at BGSQD for those of you online or anyone here who wants to do that. And there's change in the bag. If you're not already on our email list and you would like to be, you can sign up for that at the back of the room, or you can visit our website, which is bgsqd.com. And before we get started, I'd like to read a land acknowledgement and a call for a ceasefire. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-Native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. We also want to acknowledge that today, March 20th, is the 166th day of Israel's genocidal campaign against the Palestinian people, funded by our tax dollars and enabled by our government's unwavering support. We hope that you will join us in calling for an immediate permanent ceasefire, an end to the siege, and an end to the occupation in order to stop the collective punishment of Palestinians and to ensure the swift delivery of much needed food, water, medicine, fuel, and medical aid to the people of Gaza. So please give a warm welcome to Alvina and let's get started.
Yes. Thank you so much. I lowered this even though I didn't have to because I'm not lower. Let's see, there we go. And if I sit up with good posture, which I like to do, I'm tired. There we go. Perfect. So today, well, actually the book is coming out in 2 days, but it's here for sale. And it's the first event I do for the book. So it's like, generally I'm not at all nervous for readings, but I'm nervous for that reason. And also because I'm jet lagged as fuck. So I have no idea where I am or what time it is. So that's the other reason. I'm going to start reading the first chapter from the book. It's this kind of thing that I think a lot of people are going to get mad at me for not having a trigger warning on it, but I don't care because I think it's ridiculous. I think it's quite ridiculous to have a trigger warning at the beginning of a book or the beginning of a reading for that matter. I'm just going to start. No, 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 no. I've lost count of how many times I've repeated that word. No. The last time I was here, I didn't even say that word, because what difference would it make? And besides, what exactly do I mean by here? It started with a relatively handsome young man seeing me pass by on the sidewalk. It continued with his face undergoing an extreme makeover from expressionless to punch or fuck or what's that freak. I've seen millions of stares in my lifetime. Still, I can only decipher their message in blatantly obvious cases. Follow me, reader, and we will find out what this one means as he follows me to provide an answer. Lust? Lust. He tells me, I got so fucking hard just watching you walk by. Love? Love. He affirms, I love she-males, skinny blonde ones with big lips especially. Hate. Hate. He ignores all my attempts to ignore him. He shadows me for 3 blocks. Then he pulls me out of the spotlight and into an alley. Then he says, don't worry, sexy girl, I just want to talk. How old are you? Let me guess, 22. Then I say, no. Then I try to walk away. Then he yanks me back. Then he says, why don't you want me? Do you think I'm ugly? Then I say, no. Then he uses his weight to force me to the ground. Then I say, no. Then he says, oh, you drive me completely crazy. The temperature outside, cold, October. A wasp can crawl, but not fly. My temperature inside, colder, December, darkest, the 21st. The wasp is hibernating to evade death. Am I saving my feelings for later? I don't know. No whimpers, no pleas. How can I stay so calm in such a predicament? I am like a stick that thinks, how can I get stiffer? I am trying to talk him out of it. How many times have I been here? I have lost count. I think to myself, not again. In a bed, on a sofa, on the subway, in my doorway, on an avenue sidewalk, never in a city park, but once in the back room of a shop. Again. My dear reader, you sense that I'm in danger, but since I'm not screaming, you don't know where to run to help. Again. I am strapped underneath a car that is driving sideways. What do I see on the ground? A dog's feces next to a rabbit's feces? I think so. I do not specialize in identifying the excrement of different species. Candy wrappers, rustle, cigarette butts, yes. No, I was not smoking them. I was doing nothing wrong. I was not using their embers to burn my skin. I swear to God, they were already littering the ground when I was brought here. The labels, Prince, Marlboro, Gauloise, American Spirits, most probably more. They wish I would shut my trap. They have no interest in making an advertisement out of the situation. Rape does not provide good publicity for their brands. Dear Prince, Marlboro, Gauloise, American Spirits, please do not sue me. I am telling the truth. Your stubs were there. I am not making up their presence. It is not my fault they were getting stuck in my hair. Leaves, yes, leaves are on the pavement as well. Very many of them. It is autumn, no, fall. Any budding flowers hidden underneath? Not till late February. The fatigued wasp buzzes with annoyance at having her perfect hibernation spot disturbed. The leaves make crunching noises, crunch, crunch, to interrupt the young man's heavy breathing, pant, pant, and awkward movements, waggle, wobble, and me. I am here as well, although I might as well not be. I murmur tiny of discomfort. A red brick juts into my left shoulder, scraping it coarsely each time he gyrates against me. A road made of rough concrete threatens to impair my clothes, reaching for the blood beneath my skin. A muddy puddle wets my right thigh, not frozen yet. That's my own body we're talking about. The young man's attempt at kissing feels as appealing as eating a sticky piece of food, cream cheese or moussaka, which has spent a full day exposed to the elements on a beach. His stubble grates like coarse grains of wet sand. The wind stings with no need for a metaphor, and the salt water is replaced by plenty of sweat mixed with the scent of Axe instead of ocean. Axe, another brand which won't wish its name mentioned in connection with rape. Yes, commercials display Axe, making the girls go crazy for you out of their own free will. It's a lie, it's a lie. They're lying to you. Sue me, find me, send me to prison. Stoning threats, yes, yes. Modern people do it on the internet. Rape acts, too exhausting to constantly carry one inside of me. But straight from the sweatshop to the rape scene, the man is wearing a pair of Nikes. My entire body is behaving like a scrunchie. He tries to stretch it out. He fails miserably. He is realizing that it's hard to take off the clothes of a person who's not cooperating, especially since he's a fumbling bundle of nerves. Huffing and puffing, he is groping and gasping, lacking all skill. I am no longer a stick. I start squirming like a trapped salamander out of water, dry and in hell. This is just so meaningless. Could he even manage to penetrate holes that are this closed? If he succeeds at forcing one open, he will use it as his own private toilet bowl, flushing down God knows what, and hoping he'll never see it again. I look towards the street. I hope someone will pass by. I hope that someone will be kind and rush to my assistance. I hope that someone will not be mean and steal my pink backpack and scram. 3 of my favorite books by Lispector, Leduc, and Roy are lying there with their quests for truth. My laptop lapdog with the script of my own book too. I see a raven circling overhead as she craws. Where is my black cat? And why hasn't she fetched a growling, barking, stray bitch to bite him in the ass? I've gotten myself out of the situation before. How many times? I've lost count. How many fingernails do I have? 10. Are they all sharpened like claws? No. 2 recently broke. That leaves 8. Enough to dig into his cheeks while scrunching up the skin on his face and yelling, "Stop it right now." I dig my nails into his cheeks, scrunch up the skin on his face, and yell, "Stop it right now." Statistics, reader. Statistics. 8 out of 10 equals good odds. 5 and 10. A scene from a panel at a trans film festival. All the directors keep repeating, "I made the film so people would know trans girls exist." The only trans woman director interrupts, "Shut the fuck up. Half of all men have slept with us." 5 and 10. These odds would be fine if they weren't secrets kept at the bottom of the back of the closets for exactly 97.3% of these men. Again, what is a dream about you that does not include you? Again, why am I here? Again, when secrets remain unspoken, they do not seep out. They explode in your face. Again. Back to the 8 sharp nails. Somehow, some way, something changed inside this particular man. Perhaps it was the pain inflicted on his face. Perhaps it was the raised decibels of my stop its. Perhaps his knee brushed up against the fatigued wasp one time too many. Perhaps it was a eureka moment where I became human. Perhaps it was something entirely different. I cannot read his mind. I can just breathe a sigh of relief for his reconsideration, his scurrying off into the night, his aborting the mission without a mission accomplished. Alone again at last. My heartbeat pounds irregularly, heard by some soaring birds, burrowing insects, and blind mammals. The icy wind blows itself into my fresh bruises to enunciate their pain. I hover somewhere between empty and invincible. The emotional landscape of this body quivers just short of an earthquake. And so it was, and so it is, that as I left the alleyway disheveled, dusting off the falls mud and leaves for my thighs and knees. I thought of Clarice Lispector, tousled with her dress torn after winning a prestigious literary prize and being molested by a top-ranked official backstage. A man trying to rape me is nothing unusual. A few have succeeded, many have failed. It is sick that I state it so matter-of-factly. It is sick that it is a matter of fact. I'd rather be raped than dead, yes, but I prefer other alternatives. A unicorn packs a strong back kick. Dear rapist, please refrain from arriving like the next tram. I'm not the one who can ensure that. Little scars on the canvas of life, little scars that I refuse to hide, lest they upset whom? And how many scars? Again, I've lost count. 7, 9, 8. They have their minds made up, and I am uncertain. How can I focus amongst all the noise? The canvas was never blank. I was born into a history that shakes its dreadful head at a better tomorrow. I hold one paintbrush, the others hold 8. I work, I work, I work on the thickness of my own brushstroke. I was taught that life is in our own hands. I work, I work, I work on my own technique. I paint a pretty picture, picture perfect. Several brushes cross it over, more and more colors, pink, purple, green, glittery, gray, black, blue, ultramarine, red, violet, red. I settle for something very messy, deeply intricate, and the damage the others can do is severely diminished. Certainly, they can still hurt me. The price of the opposite is much too high. I refuse to pay with that currency. More detailed information? Wait, wait, and find out. Later and louder. Later that night, shaken drunk by one single drink, another man tries to trip me as I'm leaving a bar. I will go home with you. Me, did I say you could come with me? But I am the greatest. Thank you. So that was the first chapter, and the other pieces that I read later is as intense, but not in the same way. But for now, I leave the word for Penny Arcade.
Hi, everyone. So I never know what I'm going to read, on the day that I'm going to read. And so I also don't know where anything is. And I'm working on a new show. So that's the thing I'm working on, which is my memoir musical, which is an episodic 9-part musical. And I'm doing episode 3, Superstar Interrupted, 1967 to 1974 at Joe's Pub on April 27th and May 2nd. So I was looking for something, couldn't find what I was looking for. And instead I found this from 2013. And we did this, some of you may know that I have Steve Zettner is here, my longtime collaborator. We have a show called Longing Lasts Longer, which we've done over 200 performances of all over the world. And originally, it was about the end of my marriage. And then it became about cultural longing instead of emotional longing. It became about gentrification. So I thought it would be fun to read this. I'm the first person in my family born in America. I was born into a family of peasants from the remote mountains of southern Italy, from Lucania, the Appalachia of Italy. They immigrated to a factory town in New Britain, called New Britain, Connecticut, in New England. These people didn't come for jobs or for a better life. They came for food. These people had no food. It colored their view of the world. You've heard the expression, life sucks and then you die. Yeah, they invented it. Even in America's bright 1950s, they lived with the memory of remote poverty steeped in la miseria, the misery. It's an ancient pagan culture. They don't call themselves Christians. They call other people Christians. When someone would knock on the door, my mother would say, "Va a vedere chi è quel cristiano." Go and see who that Christian is. When they say Christian, they mean human being. We're not Christians. We're not human beings. We're not thought of as human, but as beasts of burden, even less than beasts, mere creatures of the wild. It's an expression of hopeless inferiority. And I grew up in the shadow of the American dream, in that other world of everyday witchcraft, of spirits, of spells, of gnomes, of witches, a world hedged in by custom and sorrow, and always, always the belief that we were less than others. I would come home from school, open the door, and skip 6 centuries. It was medieval Italy, and I was a serf. When people used to ask me where my family was from, I used to say I was raised by wolves in southern Italy. I was born into that culture, and I rebelled from that culture, a culture that has no concept of rebellion because there's no concept of individuality, no concept of the individual soul or free will, only an implacable destiny where evil is not a moral thing, but a pain residing in earthly things. And I too was considered evil because I would not accept my place, my destiny, my role as a girl, a servant, a slave. And because of this, I became an outsider in my own family, someone strange and incomprehensible. The New England factory town I grew up in was full of immigrants, full of first-generation immigrant kids like me, Polish, Ukrainian, Portuguese, Lebanese, Syrian, Spanish, French Canadians, Lithuanians, and others. We played in each other's backyards, and we heard each other's mothers speak to us in foreign languages, and we ate each other's food. And that is what multicultural is. And we were cosmopolitan. We all straddled 2 worlds, and we all grew up alone. Unless, like Siamese twins, we killed off one of ourselves so that the other could live and be American. I would rush home from school every day at 3:30 to watch Dick Clark's American Bandstand. New Britain, Connecticut is a factory town. When people hear you're from New Britain, they say, "Oh, New Britain, girls from New Britain, fuck." Walking downtown meant walking through miles of tool and die shops, the constant pounding of the ball bearing factories. Later, when I heard walls of amps, it didn't mean that much to me. The backbeat of rock and roll was pounded into me early. And while the kids on Dick Clark had their milk and cookie break, I would go to the kitchen and have focaccia and pickled eggplant and watered wine. I realized I wasn't the all-American girl. I was the other American girl. I grew up caught between 2 cultures. And as I grew, I became incomprehensible to the world because I was an immigrant, because I was poor, because I was working class, because I was a girl, because people talked about me, because I had a bad reputation, because I ran away, because I rebelled, because I was branded bad, because I got put away, because I was queer, because I could not fit in, and later, because I would not fit in. New Britain, Connecticut, exporting Black & Decker, Stanley tools, and bad girls. In that house, I was made mute, and every expression of my individuality was beaten down, and I retreated into my imagination. Peasant people don't believe in imagination, they believe in work. When I would tell my mother that I was home late from school because I was lost in my imagination, my mother would say, "Oh, in America you have imagination. In Italy we didn't have imagination. In Italy we didn't need imagination. In Italy we worked." For my mother, the future was not a blank slate. There was only destiny. There was only the implacable now. The only difference, my mother would say, was that in America, we work with the clock. There was no upward mobility, only drudgery, the ditch digger, the factory, the sweatshop. The sorrowful, passionate music in my mother's record collection called me. And when everyone left the house, I would put on that music and dance myself into oblivion. You wake up and I'm lying here, back in bed, staring at the tree outside the window, the cypress tree that makes our bedroom look like Tuscany. I am sad, sad beyond belief, and you too are sad. Slowly you talk about your long unhappiness with me. There's only me and your unhappiness. Our great love gets acknowledged in passing, but your unhappiness has center stage. Look, you said, there's your age. I mean, you're still young now. This is a good time to do this. I didn't think this would be an issue 10 years ago, but 10 years from now, you'll be 68 and I'll be 56 and it'll be an issue then. I'm falling inside myself. I can't change that fast. Even with my resentments, my thoughts of what it would be like to be with other people, live other lives, you're still real for me. On the phone, Steve said to me, that last day I saw you, you said, I love my trip and I'm satisfied and I'm ready to be home with him for the winter. I never heard you say you were satisfied before, and I crowed, I'm satisfied. On my trip back, before I returned to you in Palermo, in Fuerteventura, in Gerona, in Marrakesh, I started to feel bereft, like I was all alone in the world. And I felt poor, terribly poor. And I wondered, where is this emotional poverty coming from? And I scrambled to think of ways I could earn money, reinvent myself, go back to answering phones in a whorehouse. Too old to whore now. Menopause would make that impossible. Perhaps the distance, across the distance, I now believe I felt your thoughts, you packing me out of your life, you dismantling our relationship, our family, our love. Maybe I could get a place on the other side of town, I said. Silence, then. I don't think that's a good idea. Because you want autonomy, I asked. Yes, you replied. That's it. I want autonomy. That's what autonomy is. No, I thought. That's what privacy is. You want privacy, but I didn't say it. This is all about me, you said. Very little of this is about you. I never can last more than 7 years with anyone. On the phone, Steve said, I never saw it coming. I thought you two would be together forever. Me too. I felt like you in Palermo. When I called you from the payphone, jet lag, forgetting momentarily that it was our anniversary, I too was disconnected, but I found my way back to you. I planned a little surprise for you when I returned to celebrate our 9th anniversary, Malibu, the motel there. But you two had a surprise for me. I feel like a heel telling you this, you told me. What can I do? I can't beg. It would do no good. Maybe you've just been able to forget our love. It's a relic now, a souvenir from another time. You're ready for the new you and the new life that waits unknown. In these past few years, I've lost my mother, my health, so many friends, and an entire way of life. And now to lose the love of my life, it seems too much. 2 years after my mother died, the house I grew up in had to be sold. I was probably one of the few 53-year-old people in the world who still had their teenage bedroom intact. I returned to my bedroom that had originally been my parents' bedroom and had become my bedroom when I was 12 years old. It was the room I was conceived in, the actual bed that I was made on. The first spark of my life occurred on that mattress. It was the room where my jewelry box lived with all the mementos that traced my life from birth to 16, my old records, my shoes, some old toys, and my old clothes. The mirror where I first saw my new breasts, first saw my pubic hair, and all my diaries, which I would leave there between my travels from the ages of 16 to 30. I sat on the floor and I started to read them, page after page of love letters and love poems, passion and sadness, and explanations of myself to apparently disinterested ears. And as I read them, I started to question, who the fuck am I writing to? Who are these people? Who are these boys? Even when there were names, I couldn't remember any of them. Who was Doug? Who was Jim? Who was Tony? Who was Bob? Page after page of railing, of passionate disclaimer. And for the life of me, I couldn't remember who one of these people were. And yet I was always there, always the same, always ready to love, always ready to put myself second to the needs and desires of somebody else, always ready to explain my strangeness, my difference, while totally accepting their strangeness, their difference, their aloofness, their rejection, their desire for me. They blended one into the other, one love affair rolled into the next, but it was always me, and I was always the same, always yearning, always accepting, always longing, always grasping after transcendent love. In Turkey, the 40-year-old Yasmin said to me, I can't believe that you travel alone. Most women are afraid to be alone when they become old. Not me, I said. Yeah, because you're brave. No, I'm really not brave. But you see, I'm not afraid to be alone when I'm old, because you see, I was afraid to be alone when I was young. I think I'll stop there.
That made me a bit emotional.
Yeah, well, you know, there's a lot of commonalities.
Exactly, yeah. A moment. Yes, exactly. Because actually the theme of this book is about traveling alone, which is then what you finished off with. And there's a lot of this longing and yearning for, exactly as you say, this transcendent love that is always too much for most people. But that's, I almost want to change what I read, but it's too late now, because then I'd have to then you'd have to sit here for 5 minutes and be like, no, not this one, not this one. So I'm gonna do what I planned. And this is on page 87. That tells you nothing. It's about 1/3 into the book. And it's when I've traveled to Iceland alone, right before I turned 30. It's a few years ago. So I'm there and I start to go into nature, and I start to have kind of this love affair with nature and understanding how much of my yearning can be placed there as well, and these things that are much bigger than a person. And this particular scene that I'll read from is after I've been to a waterfall and kind of engulfed the whole waterfall. And now I go to a glacier, and I start getting a lot of emotions for this glacier that is melting in Iceland. And one more thing I want to say about that, because another big thing about this book is that it's describing a lot the contrast between city and nature. So there's these scenes in Paris and in Berlin where I'm overwhelmed by male attention, by objectification, by just people being everywhere when I want to be alone and write. And then being in nature where I'm allowed to be alone and kind of, unfold in the emotions. You'll see some unfolding now. After 12 minutes of near running, our group reaches the threshold of this gargantuan black ash-covered ice mass. Intimidation and anticipation shake my body from its core to its borders. The surrounding soundscape lets out a whisper. Trickle, trickle, trickle. Every 11 minutes, you can hear the crash of tiny breakdowns from within the frozen fortress. I imagine the booming sound of a gigantic collapse, which must occur from time to time. A stream of water seems to be coming out of nowhere, but one does not have to be a genius to understand that the somewhere is melting ice. In some parts of the world, a stream can also flow out of rocks or firm soil, reminding us that we have no idea what is going on just feet below us. Right in front of me, a tiny patch of bare glacier reveals a structure clear as a mountain lake. I brush my hands against its sub-zero stone body, caressing my new giant friend. I must feel each specific element against my bare skin. I gather volcanic ash deposits from Eyjafjallajökull and rub them on my face. I kneel down to rinse everything off with a shock of freshly melted glacial water. This must be the ultimate face exfoliating spa treatment. It could not be created in exactitude by any spa in our world. I rest my cheek against the ice giant, and begin to weep for her mile-long retreat. My saltwater tears join forces with her meltwater dittos, lamenting as they bid farewell to their respective sanctuaries. At this rate, the entire glacier could be gone within 50 years. I realize human sadness is nothing in comparison. Have you listened to the sound planet Earth voices out into space? Yes, no. No human being can run the 1.8 kilometers between Solheimajökull year 2000 and Solheimajökull 2018 at full speed. I don't think you'll find a clearer moral of the story, even by turning over each and every rock in your path, some of which will end up in my plastic bag, destined for a big city life in Berlin. All around me, the muddy soil is littered with puddles, unlikely to return to their preferred state of ice for millions of years. This rapid melting is not the act of a witch or the Katla volcano with her immense surprises. Humans can't even predict volcanic eruptions. They're too busy bringing about their own disasters and dreaming American dreams. What can you expect when a whole nation, a superpower, is built upon the principle that not being a millionaire is just a temporary circumstance, an embarrassment soon to be overcome by hard work? I'm ashamed that we are letting our dreams be used as mechanisms of control instead of profound freedom. Reader, can literature prevent the murder of nature or just disturb a too comfortable person? I'm typing these desperate words into my lapdog keyboard, the way one plays my most beloved instrument, the piano. Despite my efforts, the sound that comes out is less like a musical sonata and more like the pitter-patter of rain. What a lacking instrument, these words. Yet, they are amongst the strongest tools gifted to us. Some words are secret soul storms birthed deep inside of me, you, us, longing to be liberated from the prison of one body. If kept from ourselves or stored in the form of too many broken promises, some words can cement us all into statues. I advance a few steps away from the dirt and begin to hike up the glacial ice cap. Our tour guide hollers, "Stop dead in your tracks, Missy. The ice monster will eat you if you treat her like a walk in the park." I obey. I'm in a situation where the sturdy voice of knowledge is to be trusted more than my inner adventurer. It is dangerous to stride any further, lest one should slip and fall between the cracks. My body would be very well preserved there, freezing with no shivers. However, I risk providing the agents of global warming with an argument for their misdeeds. I can already hear them saying, with a Texan accent, of course, "In order to fetch this here body of an American, we must melt this here whole chunk of ice." Not a very good Texan accent, I apologize, but whatever. No, this isn't true. I'm no president. I'm far from that insignificant. I can die in peace. Yeah, I can get away with that if I'm in like Sweden or Berlin or something, but I'm in the US and then it's like, anyhow, I can die in peace here if I want to. If you can have a smile on your face while imagining your own dead body, something good has happened in terms of separating yourself from your ego. Death is one of many ways for the earth to remind us, you don't own me. I wobble down from the ice slope without falling on my butt or flat on my face. This can't stop new teardrops from forming inside my corneas. They know very well they won't be granted access as members of the UN Security Council or deemed acceptable in government cabinets or boardrooms. However, is there any better way of reminding the powers that be of the dangers of overflowing water sources than storming their meetings with a choir of sobbing faces? I am hopelessly naive. I am hopelessly naive because I'm desperately searching for a plan that could work. And in this search, I must try each and everything that has never been attempted before until I find something that does the trick. I do not try on tears like one tries on clothes. The last century was a psychopath. This one is still a teenager. In the city, I'm forced to be an object, and my rebellion, a flood of tears. I am a crying object, crying, screaming to survive her own life, bloodied by the belief that we do not share the trait of breathing in oxygen and breathing out carbon dioxide. In nature, I become a mother. If I watch a flower for a full day, I can follow its cycle, rhyming in tune with the sun while gaining the trust of bees. A water lily in the Amazon lives for only 48 hours. She changes color from eye white on day 1 to violet pink on day 2, and her gigantic leaves can carry the weight of a light adult like me. I'm sorry, reader. When describing an island filled with both fire and ice, I simply must expand the storyline from chamber music to a full orchestra. An island can do much more than just carry its own weight. My words expect the same from their readers. My world craves the same from its humans. I am not the author of a scenic brochure. I have greater ambitions than boosting tourism. Nevertheless, one must always return from the retreat of a fantasy back into the material world that surrounds us. My return is brought about by the arrival of a hailstorm. I cannot see the rainbow behind the rainbow, as my visual sense is observing the formation of dancing ice bulbs swaying to the music of wind gusts, sometimes falling one direction, other times crashing against each other like they're in a mosh pit. Thankfully, we have now left the glacier behind us and are sheltered by the bus. I am hoping these seeds of ice are a premonition, a sign that a god, a president, or a fool on the hill has listened to my desperate pleas and cries and calls. So we'll have a bit of a Q&A now for people who want to ask questions. Otherwise, the book is also for sale and I will sign it. So I'm happy if you buy it, then I can sign it. And I don't know if I often give this little like mwah mark also, you can have that as well. But first Q&A. So questions, comments, feelings.
Is it your first novel?
It's my first one in English, yeah. I wrote one in Swedish, one nonfiction book in Swedish and one novel, but it's the first one in English. And I'm really happy that I changed language for many reasons. But the main reason is that it's the first language I learned and that I spoke as a child till I was 14. So it's my emotional language, and it makes sense to write poetry or fiction or prose in your emotional language, not necessarily the one that you develop later. So Swedish is good for me with nonfiction, but fiction is better in English, I think. Mhm.
I think the readings are so powerful. Thank you for reading them to us and also for reading them with such affect. And I was wondering, like, of course, when one writes a book, one never quite knows what it's going to do in the world and one has no control over it. But if you had a magic wand, what would you want? What would you want this book? What is your hope for it? What do you want it to do in the world?
I mean, the book ends with this kind of this line. This must leave the text body and creep into the world, or it'll all have been in vain. So it's kind of interesting that you asked that question, because that's where it all leads. You know, a lot of things I would hope it does. I don't want it to increase dogma, if we say that. I don't want it to be like, and it's not either, like in its core, it's not that at all. And I think that's also why it took a while to find its publisher, or for a publisher to find it, is that it's not the kind of party line trans 101 kind of thing going on. So it's not going to increase this kind of, you know, course, like trans women are women, trans men are men. It's not a pamphlet. It's much more complicated than that. And I guess like one important thing that I would like it to do is for people to sit more with complexity, because I think that would be a very good thing in most circles. Second thing is just as a literary experience, I want the poetry and the language and the style and the form to stand for itself and to be an experience that holds the reader and maybe shakes the reader also, both. The main like political thing that I hope it starts to, you know, create more of a discussion around is straight men's desire for trans women, and how secretive it is, and how most of them, when they desire us, handle it in, if not like a directly violent way, then an emotionally violent way, because they don't have the words or the structure in their lives around them to hold that, of, you know, deviating from the herd, or maybe the first time in their lives, which scares them. Not all of them, but most of them. And I would like that discussion to come up more, because I feel, especially with the trans women who are into men, which I'm one of, very much one of, it's a very ruinous thing. I mean, we hear all the time about these murders, which are also usually, it's not men who hate trans women usually who murder trans women, as men who desire trans women and then hate themselves for that, and then have to kind of react. So that's the extreme form, but then you have all the other forms of various heartbreaking things that are, at the end of the day, about desire and love not being able to run its course, and instead being cut off and disposed of when it could blossom. And that's something that I would really like to, and in that way also is how I'd want it to be entered. Not in this kind of way of like, I don't know, polarizing things more, but in that way actually is how I'd want the discussion to look like more. Yeah. More questions? Or do we go to a more informal part? And I stand over there by the books, guarding and not letting you leave before you bought one.
So just
yeah,
your literary artistic calling, you kind of answered this in terms of not wanting your experience to be in vain. At what point did you decide your struggle, your life experience was something you needed to write? How did you transfer into an artistic sensibility, literary sensibility in your life?
That's a good question. I was like, I mean, I always had too much going on and not fitting in, both for being too feminine and also just the way I was. But I definitely, well, I didn't have any artists around me growing up. Like that was not my milieu. Like, I don't think my parents knew a single, even remotely artistic person. They didn't know a single, even remotely homosexual person. Or maybe they did, but the person was closeted, I don't know. But anyhow, that was the kind of space I came from. So these things were not, on the table. But I think more and more, like when I became a teenager and like it had to come out somehow. And the first time I fell madly in love when I was 19, and I had so much emotions, was when I started really like writing a lot and started to understand that, okay, writing is good for me in this way because I am so introverted. I'm explosive too, so I'm like, I can be on a stage and, hang out with 300 people, it's simple. But, and then for a short while also chat with 300 people also, but then I want to go home and be alone, maybe even for a month, and that's why writing really works for me, because it's like, I get that space, and when my thoughts and my emotions are too much, as they often are, I get that outlet. And where that turned from like a just personal thing that, no one has to read, into something that I thought was relevant for people to read, that's a longer process that I'm not finished with either. Because I'm always reading new works and getting inspired and learning more about the craft and learning more about myself and learning more about the world. That doesn't stop. So I'm still, I'm not as much at the beginning as when I was 19, but I'm still very much at the beginning. More questions? Yes.
So bearing that in mind, since this is your first book in England,
Yes.
I mean, this is very broad but what you're, that's the whole point. I mean, I know you're always writing, but what do you want to write next, if you know at all, or are you working on anything?
I am. I have like 300 pages of notes. Yeah.
In like well, I suppose we've heard pieces from this novel and discussed a bit of what you want to have it affect in the world. And I suppose the better question would be, how would you want to either branch off from that or expound on what's in this book, just going forward, be it nonfiction, fiction, poetry, whatever.
All of it, kind of, because I'm very multi-genre. I don't want to stay in one genre. I don't want to stay in fact or fiction. I don't want to stay with one theme. I would say, like, this book is kind of, because it's in this kind of travelogue form, even though it branches out in many, many different directions and many internal monologues, and then you're back to the external. But generally, the way my mind works, it's much more fragmentary. I think in the future, probably I would like to write more works that are more fragmentary. Like, one of my favorite books of all time is, I'm not saying that I'm going to write that book myself because it's already been done, but the form of it I really like is Fernando Pessoa's The Book of Disquiet, that more has, these kind of short, very deep things that you can sit with, but that doesn't have this need to, create a full narrative. that's a direction and it's free. There's a lot of freedom in that too, because then maybe I can have, 10 points that are very, very nonfiction and political that are like, and then go back to 10 points that are, extremely emotional, poetic, abstract. So that, I don't know, like my favorite books are the ones that have given me multiple things, not just one thing.
Don't you think that this, I mean, I've known you for quite a while and you were pretty young when I met you. And at that time you were more like kind of androgynous, more
Yeah.
non-binary. And it seems to me that this book is also like a travelogue of identity, because you've really gone for that identity. I mean, it's not as obnoxious as it is in some people. If you know what I mean, because it's not dogmatic, it's not, it doesn't have that, it's more human and it's more varied, you know what I mean? It's not just one thing, as we find that, with the card carrying thing, which can be with anything, I mean, card carrying heterosexuals, card carrying homos, card carrying lesbians, card carrying non-binaries, dressed in really ugly clothes. But I, for me, like when I, because I know you as a person and because I've been privy to your journey at critical moments, it seems to me that I don't think you're going to write this book again.
No.
And I think it's very connected to, you stepped into something, you stepped into a reality, that you can't control. And of course, women already know, biological women already know about that because that's our reality every day. And when
well, the secretness is a little,
it's a little bit,
there's differences, but similarities.
But the secret, it's still a secret. Okay, because men can have a secret for wanting to be involved with you. You know what I mean? And, certainly, I've been raped more than 5 times in my life. So I'm just saying that, just not to discount it in any way, but Ryan, Rhiannon Stiles.
I don't.
You don't know
Yeah,
Rhiannon? Oh, I
no.
thought you did.
Yeah.
In London? Oh, okay. Well, when she transitioned, she danced for me. She danced and I knew her when she was a boy and was a boy dancer. And then she came and somebody told me she was transitioning. So I went up to her and she came to audition. I said, well, you don't have to audition. I know you as a dancer. And I said, you're transitioning? And she said, yeah. I said, oh, okay, become a woman and find out what a drag it is, So I think that you needed to write this experience that you were having, that was a very, and it's you personal, and then it's for the world as well, for other people, But I just feel like that journey it's such a specific time in your life, and and I think it's beautiful writing.
No, absolutely. It's a very specific time in my life, but what I'm trying to do with it is I'm trying to, and I hope at least somewhat succeeded with, is to let the specificity also speak to a larger human experience. So I'm not entering it through this like, hey, I'm a trans woman, no one understands me, no one can understand what it's like unless they're a trans woman themselves. It's not this kind of way of entering it. It's more, it's being, or is it watering down the experience in order to be more palatable? Because that's another way of going, of being, very pedagogical and very clear in order for like everyone to be like, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3. It's instead like entering into it from a very, very human perspective that can then, build a lot of bridges. I've had, and I was talking before about like the thing about, wanting more straight men to read it. I've had many straight men read it and say that besides, finding it politically very interesting and relevant, that they also felt that there was many things that they could relate to in the humanness and in the longing. And for me, that's super, super important. It's super, super important that and that's what I feel that art and literature, by being more complex about these things, can do in a completely different way than these pamphlets. Like if someone reads this book and is like, oh, I've been a good, I don't know, cis ally now, and I can, I read a book by a trans woman, and I know a little bit more about that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in, seeing like, okay, like if we really want to humanize the trans woman experience, we have to show the full humanity. And I'm not presenting myself, and this is autofiction, so it's not completely, my experience, but it's based mainly in my experience. I'm not presenting myself as a perfect person or a perfect representative. And if some, trans woman reads this and is like, this doesn't completely represent me, or she's not showing herself as a nice person always, like, well, sorry, but I'm not always, and we're not always, and no one really is always. So why would I do that? Why would I then, write a novel? So those are the kind of things that I'm thinking about with, yeah.
I'm such an intellectual.
A very emotional one though. Yeah.
First, thank you for your words, and the reading was riveting. I'm really excited to read the book, and I'll kind of have your voice in my head. It's so powerful. I want you to talk about the title, because I've just been thinking about the title. And I'm tripping up on the horror, because there are ways in which also the first chapter with the threats of violence, the threats and the actual violence, the horror starts to dance into being maybe an and. So I was thinking about that, but also something audacious about it, because it's also an imperative. So you're also telling the reader, okay, you have to do this as well, love or risk it all, basically. So I would just love. Yeah, there's so much going on in it.
Yeah, I haven't thought so much about the title, but I guess I'll try to think about it in a moment. It felt right. That's the main reason why I had it. It actually was first Or Die Trying, but then I felt that Get Killed Trying was a bit more gut-wrenching somehow. And it also shows that it's, violence being done to you rather than, just passive death or whatever. But okay, I'm trying to think in this for a moment, and I don't have it. Yeah, basically, there is so much in this book about trying to love despite all the obstacles, despite all the pain, despite all maybe the not so much love that you're receiving. You're still trying to give it. And it's a grappling with that. It's not this kind of, oh, just love yourself kind of, self-care moment going on at all. I think there's a part in it where I write that like, I don't like self-care, I like to be self-careless or something. It's not that, I write something else, it's not that stupid, but it was something in that direction. So it's not that kind of, self-help, self-care. I'm hugging myself now. It's not that kind, it's not like that. It's more about, really feeling that like, why can I not? Because it's so difficult. It's so difficult, and that's why the Get Killed Trying is there, because I think it's often this way, and not just for trans women. Like if you're a very sensitive and vulnerable person in this world, for all the structural reasons, you get, stepped on a lot, and it hurts a lot. So, yeah. Yeah.
You should go and tell them.
I just had a follow-up. I was also thinking of the title, which I think is like really beautiful. It's like so kind of like, it's such a powerful title.
Mhm.
And I was thinking of like, of the philosopher Hannah Arendt,
Mhm.
who has this phrase, amor fati, which basically means love the world as is.
Mhm.
Like, because so many of us want the world to be different in order to love it.
Mhm.
And when you were describing kind of like this scene with a glacier,
Mhm.
and kind of the melting of it, it's sort of like, even as something is being lost, there's this sort of like hyper presence, sort of like for what is, sort of like the sadness for what is being lost, but also the having what everyone has right now.
Mhm.
And there's something about that that I think is very hard for us to think about.
Mhm.
That to think, to be present with what is, even when it's starkly insufficient and starkly disappointing and starkly violent, and yet it exists, as opposed to, like, that's the world that we do have for now, even as we fight for something better, even if we wish for. So there's something that feels extremely bold about an insistence and a proclamation and an order to love the word as is. So I just wanted to thank you for that. So beautiful.
Thank you, thank you. Exactly, yeah, because the world is as it is, and even if one really wants to change it, that change doesn't necessarily happen overnight, so it or never happens overnight, so you will have to sit with it at the same time. Certain things also that I'm fighting for, like these things I was talking about before, I don't know if that's gonna, change so much for me. It could change individually for me, that, I find someone and have a great life with him, it could happen. But in today's day and age, most trans women are surrounded by a bunch of men who, lust after them, but will never show up for them publicly. That's just the reality, that like we've been put in this category of, this kind of Madonna whore concept, like the whore. And the whore is someone you lust after, but you don't take home to mother and you keep her here. And that's kind of what you automatically become as a trans woman, no matter how maybe much of a nun and you've never had sex with anybody, which I'm not that experienced, but you are. And that's something like this kind of thing is going to take some time. And I hope that like in 30 years, like with trans women, they don't have to go through that. But at the moment, that's what it is. And then you have to, somehow find some way to navigate this so you don't completely drown. Although there's this Greek song that I quote in it, and it's good that you asked the question. Kegome rixikialo laristi fotia, pnigome petame sethalata vatia. And that means I'm burning, throw some more oil on the fire. I'm drowning, cast me in the deepest sea.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's quoted several times. More questions?
When did you know you could write? When did you know you could really write? When you could write?
Oh, it's getting harder and harder. I still don't know. I mean, it depends on what day you find me. On certain days, yeah, I feel very self-confident and cocky, but then there's other days where I feel like have I even written anything in my life? Am I any good? Is there anything that I've written that should be read by, like, it varies. And then other days I have this, kind of hubris of like, I'm so amazing. I'm such a great. So it depends. I mean, to be a good writer, I think you have to have a little bit of hubris and a little bit of, and a lot actually of self-doubt. Because if you don't have the self-doubt, you don't develop, you don't continuously, have this thing, this friction. You need it.
But at what age? There must be. That you wrote, that is bloody good that I've written. I want people to hear it.
Well, maybe I thought that when I was 8, but it was horrible when I wrote it, you know?
Cite it, because you're brilliant at reciting it as well.
This I started with in my 20s, but I don't know, like, again, like it varies if I. Yeah, I can't really answer that it wasn't age because it's not a constant either, so there's no. More questions?
I just wanna,
Yeah.
I just wanna say.
I think it should be the last one and then we go to the books.
It's
Oh,
not.
what time is it?
It's not even a question of.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just gonna say, I think that's pretty much the response we would get from any writer, people, well. I am a writer, but I go, oh, I'm not a writer, and people ask me, when did you start writing, when did you, what? And I have no fucking clue, so, same.
Yeah, no, I think it's not an occupation in that sense, it's more a vocation, a calling. And the muse is there sometimes and sometimes not, and when it's not there, I sometimes doubt that I'll ever write again. And at some point, maybe I won't write again. You know, I don't necessarily think these things are, for me, probably it's lifelong, but I also don't know. And I want to stay an amateur with these things. I want to write because I feel the passion, not because I feel, oh, I've written 4 books, so I better write a 5th because that's my job. If it becomes that, it's
Again, what
downhill.
you're trying to do.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. And I'll be available over there.
Thank you, Alvina. Thank you, Penny.